how hard can it be to make the Gutenberg printing press? Ooh! Ooh! Yeah, certainly this is working. Hey there, I'm Sabrina Cruz, and this is History Remade with Sabrina. In each episode, we deep dive on an iconic object in history and explore the interesting engineering behind the build. Today, we're making the Gutenberg printing press to figure out how this surprisingly simple machine took Europe from producing 50,000 books per year to 1.5 million, laying the foundation for how information is spread today. Let's do this. Alright, so I feel like in the past 15 years, with the rise of the internet, we've lost an appreciation for how bonkers important and impressive printing is. Like, I catch myself scoffing when somebody asks me for a printout. Like, who has space for a printer? Who has money for ink refills?
I mean, I have a printer.
You do? Anyway, if we rewind 6-ish centuries, my frivolousness with printed pages would be wild, because printing changed the world. Back in olden day Europe, spreading information was difficult. One of the main options was oral communication, but it was only as accurate as the speaker's memory, reached only as far as speakers could travel, and lasted only as long as people listened. Now, you might think that the solution would be to just write stuff down, right? But literacy was neither accessible nor important to the average person, so only the rich and or religiously affiliated elite were able to read and write. This meant that handwritten books were expensive, one of a kind, and nearly impossible to access, creating a cycle that trapped the spread of information. However, this changed when Johann Faust, or Faust, funded a project by a goldsmith in Strasbourg, the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg. Outside of Europe, many Asian cultures had explored printing for centuries, but whether it was by rumors along the Silk Road or parallel development, Gutenberg happened to be the first in Europe to unify the most efficient methods seen worldwide, setting off a printing revolution in Europe. Now, the secret was in the type. Where others tended to focus on complex designs carved into wood, Gutenberg used his smithing experience to create the first movable metal type in Europe. As a result, reliefs could be assembled faster, as it was only a matter of arranging letters rather than carving them. And they were more durable than wood, which could break down quickly while printing and in storage. By combining innovations in molding, assembling, and inking metal type, Gutenberg made the once tedious, labor-intensive, and slow act of recording information a relatively simple matter of setting up the printing press, breaking the cycle, and letting information begin to flow freely across Europe and the Western world. Anyway, more importantly, do you actually own a printer?
Okay, I should clarify that my parents own a printer.
Now it makes sense. Anyway, there aren't actually any surviving printing presses from Gutenberg's time, but they were estimated to be about 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 7 feet tall. I don't have enough feet. I'm 5'4" and I don't own a ladder. So we're scaling this bad boy down to like this size. Let's go. Alright, so with every build, we're going to be focusing on exploring time-accurate techniques over time-accurate materials. That means that we're going to be using things that you could get at your local hardware or craft store. In the process of making this video, I learned that what makes the printing press important is way more than a single machine. It was a whole manufacturing process that breaks down into 5 steps. Making the type, making the press, making the ink balls, and finally, making the print. Let's start with step 1. Making the type. So, like I mentioned before, the movable metal type was like the main optimization that made Gutenberg's printing press special. I just bought some metal type because, as you're gonna see, making them Gutenberg's way can be pretty tricky. To start, you would need to carve out a punch. Now, that's a mirrored letter carved into a bar made out of metal. For this illustration, I'm gonna be using a candle and a precision blade. What letter should I carve? Ooh, we love branding, we love synergy. Okay, I'm gonna try not to cut my hand off. I think that would be awkward. Ugh. This is already harder than I expected. Woo. We're doing a lowercase h, because one of the upper bits just fell off. Now technically, if I had carved this in the correct orientation, we can stop here, because if we ink this up and press some paper to it, you'd have a backwards H. But remember, books are made up of more than one letter.
They are.
Do you think that there are only 26 letters in a book? So instead of carving out each letter, they would make a matrix. They would punch this inverted letter into a softer metal to make a mold. Now, I'm just gonna do that with some 2-part food safe silicone putty. The food safe is gonna come in a second. So let's make this mold. I think it's just a 1-to-1. Oh, it looks so gloopy. Can you hear the glue? I'm just gonna do a finger of each. Right?
Okay.
So now we just need to punch our punch into our matrix. Just gonna give it a little bit of shaping. Whoop. And then, ready? Oh, that looks like a letter. While we're waiting for this thing to cure, I just want to mention that Gutenberg was not the first person to ever consider movable metal type. Chinese printers had experimented with movable type made of like all sorts of materials since the Song Dynasty. Koreans printed Jikji, or the anthology of great Buddhist priests' Zen teachings with movable metal type, 80 years before Gutenberg's project. Now, we don't know if Gutenberg knew of any of this or if he just came up with it on his own, but it's worth acknowledging that while Gutenberg had a good idea and a massively popular and impactful idea, it wasn't original. Think of it kind of like Apple and smartphones. You may have heard that they invented the thing in 2007 with the iPhone, but in reality, IBM released a touchscreen mobile phone with apps way back in 1992. They even coined the term smartphone in the process. But you probably didn't know that, because being original is rarely as important as being impactful. It's the same situation with Gutenberg. He may not have been the first, but it was his printing press that changed the Western world. Whoa! Okay, I know that it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, but it is very impressive. Look at this, it's a mold, it's hard now. Okay, so now that our mold is cured, it's time to pour a mixture in. That mixture is actually gonna be our final type. Now in Gutenberg's day, he would pour in a mixture of molten lead, tin, and antimony. But in my case, I'm gonna be using melting chocolate. Melissa, can you melt this chocolate, please? You're so proud of yourself. Look at that. I think it's time to pour the chocolate. Ooh. Ooh. I brought way too much chocolate in hindsight. I'm working with a sans serif font that I carved out here, but back in the day, Gutenberg's font was based off of like monk handwriting. It looked like this, right? And so it had a lot of these little like skinny bits to it, so it was really hard to get the mold to fit. Hopefully we're gonna have a better success rate with our chocolate blob right now. How long does it take for this to cool down? Oh, it's definitely still wet. She's cooled down now. Okay, so once the metal cooled to a solid, or our chocolate has cooled to a solid, it's time to pop it out. I'm really hoping I don't break this. Get out. There we go! Sorry, I yelled, I got excited. There's a lot of air holes. However, you can see the letter H in there. It's technically backwards for our purposes, but we can pretend it's a Y, right? Okay, it's melting now. Let's move on to step 2, making the press. Now, I didn't know how a printing press actually worked until I started this project. So here's the rundown for the people in the same situation I was in. You need a relief, a 3D pattern where the stuff you want to print is raised and inverted. Kind of like these letters, or numbers. Let's just use this 9. Now you want to apply ink to this raised region. Here's some ink. There are different ways to apply it. I'm just gonna dip it in, kind of. That did a surprisingly good job. So now that we have ink on our raised region, we want to press another material onto it, like vellum or paper. Let's get pressing. Now, when you remove it, you should have a print. Let's see. That's a number 9 right there. Woo-hoo. Now the presser's job is to keep this process a lot more stable and apply a uniform level of pressure onto the paper and relief. Now, there aren't any surviving presses from Gutenberg's time, but we have enough illustrations to get a good idea of how it worked. So I've pre-machined a few parts. I know I said that we're using time-accurate techniques, but the least interesting part of the printing press is cutting holes into wood. So I did it with an electric drill, which probably would have gotten me burned at the stake in the 16th century, but I don't care. Anyway, let's put this press together piece by piece, starting with the base. What part is the base? That is a cheek.
It's not looking much like a printing press yet, but I trust you.
Do you know what a printing press looks like?
I think what I've been imagining this whole time in my head has been a typewriter, not a printing press.
Anyway, let's put this press together piece by piece, starting with the base. Now, it would be made of sturdy wood so that the machine wouldn't break down while it was in use. I'm using a drill now. I just want to flag that before anyone comments anything a little bit sexist, I don't represent women. I represent incompetent woodworkers. Take that as you will. Righty-tighty. So unfortunately this thing, I love it, but it's a little wobbly, so we've got these little corner supports. You're gonna see my terrible clamping abilities. Okay, I think I need help. Could you hold this piece of wood in place while I clamp it?
Hold up. I'm coming to help.
I need you to be my clamp.
Okay, tell me what to do.
I need you to not be scared, but hold this thing in place while I drill. I need you to be real strong about it with your delicate, beautiful nails as this drill comes in.
Okay.
Ready? Great stuff. Look at that.
Oh, that's good.
She's secured in there. We're gonna do it again.
Okay.
I love safety. You ready?
Go.
Ooh! She got in there. We're good. Is your hand okay?
We're good.
Oh, the little gas got me worried.
Oh.
Feel how sturdy that is. It's sturdier than the table we're on.
Oh, wow.
Right?
We can build a shelf. Who needs
We're building a printing press. Okay, fun names for the things that we've just put together. This is called the head. These are cheeks. And this is a plank. Do you need to know these words? Not really, but now you do. Next thing that we need to do is add the thing that does the pressing. It's basically a big flat plank of wood, or in our case, MDF, hanging off of a big screw, or a threaded rod. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna thread our rod through. I'm gonna get this thing spinning for content.
Okay.
Oh God, no, this is a terrible idea.
It's a fork.
So this chunk of wood is called the platen, and it's the thing that actually does this pressing action. You can tell that as this rod will go downwards, it's gonna add some downwards force, pressing this thing down. In a way that fits, in a way that fits, in a way that fits. Cut twice, measure once. So we need to be able to spin this without actually spinning this thing around, right? So we need it to hang off of this piece, right? It's hanging off of a lip. Ooh, look at this. So as this rotates, guess what isn't rotating? This thing, mostly. The reason that you don't actually want this thing down here spinning is because imagine if you wanted to print a piece of paper and then the force applying to it was just like doing this. You'd end up smushing the paper around, which would smudge the ink, and it would just be chaos. So that's why we've got this whole lippy doodad. I'm certain that's the technical name for it. So we are using like this threaded metal rod here, but actually Gutenberg's was made out of wood. We didn't bother recreating it because he ripped it off of wine presses, which use the same principle for pressing, except instead of paper, it was grapes. We've got a little dowel. We're gonna put it through that hole and it's gonna rotate. Watch this. Wow, such spinning action. Oh God, that's not smooth at all. There we go, there we go. Yeah, certainly this is working. The real problem is that I forgot which way I'm supposed to be rotating this. Let's tie these things together first. But before we attach it to the screw, I actually want to talk about the application area where we put our type and our paper. More terminology for you. This is the coffin, this is a tympan. Basically, you see this little slot here? This is our sad excuse for composing sticks. So all of your type would be there, inverted, and now we have this frame thing, right? This tympan. It'll have a piece of fabric secured onto it, which we're gonna do. You attach your text, you put in a thing called a frisk. Maybe I should just put it all together. Give me 1 second. Let's put this together. There we go. So the type would usually be put together on these things called composing sticks. They're kind of like the things that you would put Scrabble tiles on, except every line would be completely inverted. For simplicity's sake, I just carved out a line in our coffin to just drop in our type. Check it out. Look at this fit. Ready? I hope it fits. Measure 0. Oh, it fits. Oh my gosh. It's just nice to have.
A win? Were you gonna say win?
Yeah. Anyway. So now technically I could just apply some ink to this, put a piece of paper on top, press down, and woo, we'd have a print, but there's nothing here. Anyway, it would be hard to keep that consistent if you want multiple copies to look the same. So that's why we've got this thing. It's called a tympan. It's essentially just a frame on a hinge. It's covered in fabric or cardstock with markers for where you'd want to place the page consistently every single time. Are we going portrait or landscape?
Portrait. Write me a letter.
You're asking so much of me. So we'd mark that down, and then the next thing is we'd have the frisket. The frisket is essentially just another piece of parchment that creates margins consistently, that covers up whatever you don't want ink to ever touch. So I'm just gonna, once again, no measure, just cut. It's 7 p.m. It's past measuring time. So I'm using a bunch of tape to secure this down. Maybe tomorrow I'll come up with a better solution, but for now, for illustrative purposes, ta-da! Okay, so now we have the tympan with paper attached to it and a frisket that I did not measure, yet worked out astonishingly well. So with the relief down here, the paper over here, you'd fold it over, and there you go. All you need to do is have a little downwards force, and it would print that press. Print that press. Let's do the next step tomorrow.
It's day 2.
After my little crisis last night, I've gone ahead and fixed up the tympan and the frisket. So now instead of tape holding everything together, very poorly, holding it together isn't even the right term, I've gone ahead and stitched in little pockets for the paper so that you could just remove it, and then you just slide it back in as needed. Now for our frisket, I just stapled it into the back. Nice, and then we fold over, and we would be ready to print. But in order to print, we need to move on to the next step. Step 3, making the ink. Now, Gutenberg's metal type was really great. It was relatively easy to make, it was robust, and it was reusable, but it didn't play nice with the common water-based inks, since that stuff tends to bead up on metal. Luckily, around Gutenberg's time, the Dutch were experimenting with oil paints, which Gutenberg found adhered really well to his type, with just a couple of tweaks. He made his out of linseed oil and soot, which is basically charcoal. Now you can get those things individually at craft stores, we can make it, but I'm not going to, because I learned that linseed oil can spontaneously combust. It's really rare, but I have really terrible luck, so I just bought some oil-based ink. I thought that it was black, and then I opened it, and it was violet. So now we're gonna have purple prints, and in order to apply it to our relief type, we're gonna need to go to step 4, making the ink balls. Nowadays, ink is applied to reliefs using rollers, but those weren't invented until a few centuries after Gutenberg died. Instead, he used these things called ink balls. I think it's a funny term. So an ink ball was just a handle attached to the bottom of a bowl, stuffed with horsehair or wool and covered with goose or sheepskin. Basically, it was just a flexible stamper that needed to be able to hold some ink without fully absorbing it. The outer layer actually evolved to be made out of leather or raw hide, which needed to be softened in urine. We're not using that. Instead, we're gonna be using some fake leather, some twine, a little bowl, just stuff I got from the dollar store. I'm just gonna quickly assemble it. Okay, so instead of stuffing this with horsehair, we're gonna just use some, like, I'm pretty sure it's just stuffing, but when I bought it, it was fake snow for Christmas decor. So it needs to be kind of soft and plush so that it could actually press against the ink and have a little bit more flex to it. So do you think that's enough stuffing? I just set this string in advance. I only know one knot. It's kind of embarrassing.
And what knot is that?
I don't know, the one you use to tie your shoelace. I'm the type of person that does the 2 bunny ears when I tie my shoelaces, and I keep getting made fun of for it. Oh, poke that. Quite plush.
Ooh.
Does anyone else want to poke? So the reason we have 2 of these is to kind of spread the ink. If you've seen a roller in use before, you'd know that they lay it on a piece of acrylic, they roll repeatedly in order to get this thin layer of ink. We're gonna try and do that using 2 of these. So you put ink on one of them, and then you kind of smush them together and spread until you get a thin layer of ink on both, and then you're gonna press it against the type. I think it's time to do that. We have our printing press, we have our paper, we have everything we need. Let's go to step 5, making the print. Now, we're gonna be combining all of the previous steps to make our print, and according to Joseph Moxon's 1683 Guide to Printing, the printer, or me, would need to be firmly resolved to keeping strictly to the rules of good workmanship. I guess I'm resolved now. Apparently it's very difficult. It's usually a 2-person job because this is usually much larger and a lot more physical, but Melissa is trapped behind the camera, so she can't help me. Do you want to help me? So first things first, I need to lay out what I'm going to write. Keep this a secret from Melissa, because she keeps thinking that I'm gonna write her a love letter. Oh my God, I need to be able to spell. Oh, this is so much harder than typing. So interestingly, typesetting is also where the term stereotype comes from. If they had a relief that they expected to use a bunch of times, they would set it once, then create a mold of the full page so that you could use it over and over again, and it would be called a stereotype. So I fully understand Moxon's whole thing about being resolved for good workmanship. This is quite a lot. Yeah, that's it. That didn't take me 6 minutes. All right, so I need to double check my type, but I don't think there are any typos, and I need to make sure my paper is placed well, which I think it is. So it's time to apply the ink. Now it's the moment of truth. Ugh, why did I get purple? Now this thing was actually surprisingly tricky because you needed the correct amount of ink. If you put too much, then you know how letters have little holes in them sometimes? You could accidentally fill those holes so then the letters become like blobs. Or if you don't put enough ink, then the letters get weirdly faded. Is it time to smoosh?
Can we say something else?
Nah, smooshing time. Ooh. Ooh. I think it's time. We're gonna apply it to our letters now. I need to get this right or else our letters will appear weird. I'm just gonna do a quick wipe off of the excess just because I'm not entirely, just wanna be safe, you know? I want a nice clean print. It's so purple. Really thought that I was buying black ink. Oopsies. It's the moment of truth. We have our paper attached to our tympan. We have our brisket to set the margins. Now we're gonna fold it on top of our type. Just gonna lay it on top. We're gonna slide it underneath and we lower it. This is gonna take a couple of rotations. So with that, we have applied a uniform pressure to our coffin and our print. So now I think we could lift it up and reveal the final page. I don't want, part of me doesn't want to do it. Part of me is just gonna imagine that I did it perfectly and we stop here. Count me in.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
There it is! Like, comment, subscribe. And there you have it, the Gutenberg printing press remade. I hope you liked that video. If you did, leave a comment down below with whatever iconic object you think I should make next. And while you're at it, you know the shtick, hit like, share, and subscribe. And don't worry. You might be sad that like this was a little bit too small, but we couldn't make a bigger one because we were pressed for time. Don't cancel this show.